Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing fine.
Good,
doing fine.
good.
Wanna
Lots of
go
stuff
over-
today.
Yeah. It seems like we never have any problems finding things.
Yeah,
It's picking it out and making sure that we've gotten the best analysis possible.
yeah.
And
That's on
some
us.
some of the people we look at, on the other side of this argument, they flip-flop a bit too.
Yeah,
Say,
yeah.
well, I said this 2 years ago, but I don't mean this now.
Or 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
2 weeks ago. Well, that's not so bad. I mean, a guy by the name of Biden does it, that flips it in his own sentence.
He flips out.
So, anyway, I want to start with, excuse me, Daniel Horowitz.
Yeah.
Because he's talking about, this is not going to end. Forget it, pal.
Yeah.
You're going to be up with restrictions forever. Liberty never. How about that?
Yeah.
And he said that even with the vaccine, I think they're, in a way, even Gates is admitting that there's no magic in the vaccine. It's just a game they play. Gates wants to give you 3 shots, and how many people are going to do it? So,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about that later. Maybe less and less are going to plan on doing it. But Horowitz is arguing or suggesting, well, what if the vaccine doesn't work? We're not going to have perfection. We're always going to have need. So we always are going to have regulations. And that's scary because I am so tired of this nonsense that goes on. And they've conditioned the people now to be terrified, and individuals and neighbors and friends are attacking others. Hopefully that is blown out of proportion and not happening as often as it seems to be, but it certainly is happening where people are attacking somebody else just because they disagree with them on the mask. Wear a mask in the wrong place, and all of a sudden you're spreading some disease. Well, yeah, the solutions are so easy, seems to me, is make it voluntary.
Yeah.
If masks are good, you wear it and go only where you want to go. And the problem is solved. And then maybe the more natural things that we argue for, like herd immunity, maybe it could develop, and maybe we would be closer to, what happened in the so-called non-lockdown in Sweden.
Yeah, and
But
elsewhere,
no,
yeah.
they won't listen to that. And I don't know if we have it on our schedule today to talk about, but some people said there's all this false information about the left are really going after the stories on Sweden and trying to explain why Sweden sounds better than it really is.
Yeah.
They're on the defensive. I think that's good, but I also worry about the Horowitzes of the world because they're continually conditioning us to expect this to last a long time, and that's the greatest fear. If this was a blip, it wouldn't matter as much as it's going to matter. And yet, I think the most amazing thing, we've talked a little bit about this, is how inclusive this thing has been worldwide, and everybody, all elements in the education, medical field, and media. There's a lot of people out there that have swallowed up the arguments that this is, this. They don't admit the term, but they are playing into the role of changing our country into a Marxist type of country where the government tells us everything. So the people that you see on TV or anything, they're scaring a lot of people.
Yeah, they are.
And setting the stage for be prepared. And I'd like to help change that attitude.
Yeah, and this is a good article. It was in the Conservative Review, which is not a publication I normally would read, but Daniel Horowitz, he writes about how they're keep moving the goalposts, and people are disoriented and they're confused. Remember, first it was 15 days to slow the spread, 15 days to flatten the curve, then we'll get back to normal. And then they said, well, we're going to have to wait until we get a vaccine, then we'll go back to normal. No problem. Just wait, just hunker down. And then they said, well, there's not going to be a normal, there'll be a new normal. And now they're saying we're never going to stop the lockdown. It's never going to happen. And Horowitz cites the director of the WHO, who, of course, as we've mentioned, is not a doctor, but a communist Ethiopian politician, who's already said, quote, there is no silver bullet at the moment, and there might never be. He said the message to the people and governments is clear. Do it all. And when it's under control, keep going. This is what they want, what the global elites want. And he points out that this moving the goalpost means lockdown forever.
And you know what they're required to do to continue this thing on? They have to either ignore truths that are out there and they can find, or they have to tell more lies, you know. And a lot of this, what they promote, just the collection of data and the interpretation of the data, the way they count cases as diseases,
Yeah.
and they then fudge the figures of percentages of how many people died, and this thing, you know, goes on, but they're under the gun, they're on the defensive, and that is good, and we hope we can continue to do this because more people are going to wake up, because yesterday I think it was we reported about the Germans.
Yeah.
The Germans woke up over the weekend.
Yeah.
And why can't we do it as well as the Germans are doing it? Enough is enough. When are we going to resist, you know?
What I think is happening is because I think the lockdown is all about control and power, from the little mayor all the way up to the big governor. And I think the fear is that we cannot relinquish this control. We don't, even if there's a vaccine, we can't relinquish it. And I think there is some fear in the elite quarters that people will look at the vaccine as a way for them to go back to normal. And Horowitz points out the Washington Post with an article, a coronavirus vaccine won't change the world right away. So, you know, stay in lockdown, stay where you are. He quotes Dr. Jonathan Grad, who's assistant professor of infectious disease at Harvard, who says, "It seems to me unlikely that a vaccine is an off switch or a reset button where we will get to go back to pre-pandemic times." So they're already warning and hedging the bets, saying, hey, this vaccine, yeah, it's going to come. A couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago, it was a panacea. But now they're saying, no, this isn't going to change much. So you have to wonder, is this about a vaccine? Is this about a virus? Or is it really about political control?
Right. I'm predicting the vaccine will never really exist. They'll maybe give it a lot of shots, but it's never going to be a vaccine where they really, you know, were able to inoculate people for German measles or something,
Yeah.
like that, because I think the biology here is completely different. But I wanted to go on to that poll, if you have some things on that.
Yeah, I was just going to mention one thing about it, and we didn't mention it before we started, so I don't want to throw it out at you, but Mises Institute, Ryan McMaken is doing a great job, and he has a great article that we just put up on the Ron Paul Institute website, and he has a, excuse me, we both have it today. He has a similar conclusion to Horowitz in that they're not going away. And he says, even by their own logic, first of all, the lockdowns don't make the disease go away. Even assuming the theory is right, they only spread out the infections into the future. And that's what they've always said. And that's why we see return to lockdown in Europe and Asia, Australia. That in and of itself proves that the lockdown theory is bogus. But here's what McMaken says, and I'll just quote this and then we'll go on to the next one. But he said the global public should expect regimes to keep locking down their citizens again and again. The only way to break the cycle is A, populations revolt against the lockdown. B, herd immunity is reached through widespread transmission or some vaccine if it actually does work. It paints a grim picture, but at least it's very stark and it's very clear what's going to happen. They're not going to let go until people say enough or there's some sort of herd immunity achieved one way or the other. So,
well, they're not going to buy that because that cuts down on the use of the restrictions and telling people what they can do. There would be difficulty of having a lockdown. My goodness, people might go back to normal activity if you just recognize where you are and how this can happen, how this can be taken care of in a more natural way. But that's what we're facing. That they are fighting, you know, some natural cures and things that can happen, and they have to have the artificial, which is what you say, the political power and the money that's involved. So.
Let's put up this first clip and we can talk about this, Dr. Paul. This is something we've talked about this morning. Yahoo News, YouGov coronavirus poll. Number of Americans who plan to get vaccinated falls to 42%, a new low. Let's look at that next chart and then, Dr. Paul, you can see what you think of this. People aren't that enthusiastic about this. It doesn't matter who you are, they're not enthusiastic about it. What do you
Well, you know, what I got a kick out of looking at that was the comment from their side was, this is so discouraging. You know, look, there are less people who want to take this flu vaccine. And I thought, this is encouraging. This is good news.
Yeah.
So, you know, people are waking up. And this is a more technical thing to make a decision, you know, on a medical thing than this. But you know who's really helped us on it? the person that's lost a lot of credibility is Bill Gates.
Yeah.
I don't know how he will be able to manage this, and that is good because I don't think he's a very good physician, and I don't think his heart is in the same place as others. So he has some other goals in mind. But I think this is very encouraging. It's very, very good. So there are people out there that are listening and watching and using common sense, but it might be just like, I've heard some pretty good descriptions of the people who like sporting events.
Yeah.
And they're just tired of all this. And they're not only, tired of the inability to go because of this, gathering together with a lot of other people, but they're sick and tired of the pressure of the politicizing by Black Lives Matter, at these ball games. And it's all politics. And I used to complain, there are some people in this world, all they care about are the sports. And I love sports. Yeah. But actually, a lot of people, if that's what they like and they're doing no harm and enjoying their liberties, I mean, they really are harmless to us. But now their liberty to be entertained and pick their own entertainment is being undermined, and they're getting annoyed. So maybe that's where the revolt will come from, the people who would like to go watch a football game, and maybe there won't be so much political activity going on there. And of course, if you're able to do that, the person that goes to the game are subtly talking about politics of personal choices, freedom of choice. Wow, this would be magic for us.
Yeah, it is encouraging that people are becoming more skeptical of the vaccine. They're reading, hopefully they're hearing a little bit more about the dangers. They're also most likely hearing that the best case scenario or the lowest case they'll accept is a 50% efficacy of a vaccine, and you have to do it many times. That means you can basically flip a coin. But the thing is that I worry about, Dr. Paul, is that this may backfire. The more people become skeptical about the vaccine, the tyrants who want to keep us locked down are going to say, aha, America, you didn't take this vaccine? Okay, well, you're going to stay in lockdown forever. It's going to keep going. So I think that's the only thing that worries me about this. They're going to do anything they can, and even if everyone lined up for a vaccine, they do something next, they'd say you need to have your internal passport. You need to have your chip to show that you're vaccinated.
Right.
That's what's next. So they're not going to back off, but it is a good sign that people are waking up.
I mentioned a minute ago about how they can flip-flop. And Redford, chairman or the leader, the director of CDC, last week he spoke out and said that more people are dying from lockdown than from the virus.
Yeah.
And when it was released, not many people even noticed it. We had mentioned it, because it's a significant statement, and I never expected him to say that. But and those are the numbers we mentioned. Then they're uncounted yet. It might take a generation to count the real harm done by the lockdown, especially if we can't get them to stop it. If it continues, they can ruin a whole generation. So this is pretty serious stuff. But now he made another statement today, and it was in a way a confession or an acknowledgement that there may have been people listed as having died from COVID, and they never had the disease.
Yeah.
Well, we reported evidence of that they never even had a test. And he was not denying that, he didn't make fun of it, but he said that and also that there's been financial shenanigans going on, that maybe the hospitals, have been fudging the figures too, especially if there is a death and the hospitals bill them. And I think that's very capable. I've never liked the trend away from, smaller hospital and community and church hospitals and things like this, but they're monstrosities that deal very much in the government. I bet you some of these big hospitals, when you add up all the Medicare and Medicaid and everything, they probably have 70-80% of their income comes, from the government.
Yeah.
So to change the diagnosis just a little bit, but he acknowledged this,
Yeah.
and that to me is astounding. And it should be a flag for a lot of people, and saying, maybe there is a lot of truth to the shortcomings of the CDC and the WHO, on their reporting, because I think their job is they're in the job of propagandizing and scaring the people, and they have the credibility. Dr. Fauci, he's the smartest virologist in the world, and if he says so, that's it.
Bow down. Well, I think Redfield, the CDC director, sometimes slips and tells the truth. That's the case. And we can put up the next clip, because this is what we're talking about here. CDC director, possibility that some individuals not diagnosed with COVID are in the death count. It's kind of funny because they call us conspiracy theorists for even suggesting that. Remember just yesterday we were talking about this Forbes magazine. A chilling number of Americans believe dangerous conspiracy theories that the deaths are being overcounted. Well, here's the guy in charge of it saying, well, yeah, you got us, we're doing that. But it's even worse if we can go to the next clip, because if you go down a little bit further in the article, this is something that you first brought up, it has to be a month or two ago, but this is Redfield testifying before Congress, and he said, according to USA Today report, hospitals get reimbursed more for treating COVID-19 patients compared to others. During a House hearing last week, Redfield was asked if he thinks there are hospitals inflating COVID-19 deaths due to financial incentives. Here's what Redfield said: I do think there's some reality to that. When it comes to death reporting, though, ultimately it's how the physician decides in the death certificate. And then he goes on to say, I think it's probably less operable in the cause of death, though I won't say there are not some cases. I do think when it comes to hospital reimbursement issues for individuals that get charged, there could be some play in that for sure.
Talking about conspiracies, I had a little interview the other day on Fox and talked about hydrochloroquine.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was a barrage that all I was talking about was a conspiracy, and all I wanted to do was let people have a medical discussion rather than saying, how dangerous chloroquine was. It's something that's been used, and we made that argument. I thought it was, not too emotional or high pitched or anything. And boy, that people said, "Yep, it's just all conspiracy stuff." And you point out that they participate in the conspiracy just as much as anybody. Besides, we only deal with honest, provable conspiracies.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them out there. And it's funny, even the people that are interviewed saying, I got sick from COVID, I was treated with chloroquine early on, and it helped me get better. That's not a political statement. It's simply an anecdotal. And, this doctor in Houston that was trashed because of her religious views, which are totally unrelated to her ability to practice as a doctor, she just simply said, I treated 350 patients with it and I haven't lost any. It's just an observation.
Yeah, it is this silencing people.
Yeah.
And it's related to the fact that the president is favorable to the chloroquine.
Yeah,
and
they hate him.
And since everybody hates Trump on the other side. Hate Trump means you have to destroy the value of a drug that's been around for 50, 60 years. So it's not very rational. And I think lockdowns and the going along with this is not rational either. I think it's very much emotional. It's very political. It's a struggle for power. And this is something that is going to be very tough to overcome, but we're going to continue trying to change people's minds on this.
I think if Trump said ice cream is delicious, they'd be dumping ice cream by the tons into the street. Here's something we talked about a little bit before the show, Dr. Paul, and this next chart I think is interesting. This is worldwide. That number going way up, the line going way up, is daily confirmed COVID cases. That flat line at the bottom is daily confirmed deaths. And this goes through August 5th, 2020. Our World in Data, which we've used before, the European CDC is the source. And you pointed this out, that this is actually kind of good news. When no matter how high you find the confirmed cases, the death doesn't track.
Now, Yeah, the more you find, and they're out there because of natural immunity, and people don't get sick, and they have the immunity. So if you have a tremendous number of new cases, which has been going on, that was their spiel now for
Yeah.
the last month or so. New cases, it's all coming back. It's going to be worse than ever. And what happens, and you put the chart up here several times, the death rate goes way down because the more people who have had it and survived it and didn't even know they had it, the lower the number is, and the fear of death is way out of proportion. A lot of people don't look at the statistic and they just say, like when these people get hysterical and they
Yeah.
go nuts
Yeah.
and start throwing things and trying to destroy somebody that doesn't have a mask on. What they're saying is that they don't understand, what the real danger is, and the danger is those people doing that, and the danger is not that you're going to die from the coronaviruses, but at the same time, people do, and if they look at age groups and common sense, all of a sudden, those problems are taken care of.
Yeah, and the people that are in a vulnerable age group, and that would be, people that are, they should take care of, and that's the case. But that is good news because it shows that it's not as deadly. But what they do is they conflate deaths and cases. Even here in our own little Lake Jackson, I keep the city government, a lot of cases. We got to keep that mask on. You got to stay away from people. Don't talk to anyone. They conflate the two. But higher cases and lower death means that the disease is not as deadly as they said.
And the other things, I think these tests are totally unreliable. I know too many people who had a positive one place, went next time, it was a negative. There's a lot of different tests out there, and I think they mean a lot less than people believe, but at the same time, a lot less since they're not reliable, and then the interpretations are wrong, and anybody that has been recorded as positive is a case, an illness, which it isn't, and we pointed out that the real numbers go down, and that's why you can show these charts, and it's someday people wake up, it really wasn't quite that bad. If you excluded the disastrous way they handled things in nursing homes, there hasn't been a whole lot of problems, going on. But right now, the big issue is will the kids ever be allowed to go back to school again? And who knows? It looks like they might, but is it really worth it if they have to go through this, wearing a mask to grade school? And this whole thing, Fauci the other day, I don't know if anybody laughed at him, but they should, and they should have done more, maybe taken him away or something. But the goggle business.
Yeah, the goggles.
I've talked to an ophthalmologist about that. He said that's pretty far-fetched.
I know who that is. I had a couple clips to end with, and if you want to comment or if anything sparks your interest, but I'll close out with a couple. And this look at this one. This is our favorite governor, Governor Whitmer. She is really mad. She is going to have a tougher crackdown in Michigan. She is tired of people violating her edicts that you have to wear a mask and social distance and don't even have people over at your house. She's one of the worst. Let's put it back up there for a second. She's one of the worst, and she's going to crack down. So when you look at this is dated August 4th. She's cracking down even further. So I'm thinking, wow, I thought Michigan was doing okay. This must be horrible. There must be a spike. So I went over to Worldometer and I looked at Michigan, and look what came up in Michigan. Daily deaths in Michigan are minuscule. Nobody's dying there anymore, and thank goodness. But she doesn't want to let go of that power. So you ask, is this anything about a vaccine or a virus? No, because she is one of those little faces, and you talked about it on Varney, who's in the running for vice president, and she wants to do the bidding of the people who she wants to have hire her as vice president. Good luck, Whitmer. Now, there's one final one here.
Oh, before
sorry,
you do
yeah,
that,
go
let me
ahead.
say put something that crossed my mind. Was another governor, the governor of South Carolina or South Dakota.
Yeah, South Dakota.
She is fantastic. She was interviewed by Ingram,
Yeah.
Laura Ingram, and she is just sensational. Of course, we've mentioned her before,
Yeah.
but I was just thinking when you were
Difference.
explaining this, what a difference in
Yeah.
the world. I'll bet if you could put those two people up just to 40 million people that they're not handpicked. There's no way that they want the South Dakota governor to be representing them. Excuse me.
No, why don't we cancel all this presidential stuff and put these two ladies against each other in a debate, and we'll vote for one of them to be president.
There you go.
We'll see what happens. Or at least let's import her down to Texas, because she's got the real Texas spirit. But speaking of Texas, and this is kind of sad, and we'll do it just for a second, because this next chart shows that nearly half of all COVID-19 fatalities in Texas have been at nursing homes or assisted living facilities. And that's the real story of COVID. And thankfully in Texas, they didn't put the sick people in with the healthy people as they did in a lot of blue states. But still, this is a tragedy. It's terrible. And I'll finish with one thing, because I'd like to have people go back to the Ron Paul Institute website. But we just put up a piece from our friend Robert Wenzel on the importance of resisting mask mandates. It's called "The Importance of Resisting Government-Ordered Mask Wearing." It's a great piece, and he basically is saying, if you are resisting the mask wearing, you have to understand that this is just, it may not be as onerous to some people. Hey, wear a mask, and I understand that. I don't want to fight when I go in the store. But his warning, and it's really worth reading this piece, is that this is just the beginning, and this is a test run. It's going to be something more after this. So if you're in the mood for resisting, it's probably better to do it early on. And the people that have been wearing masks are getting angrier. They're getting angrier at those of us who aren't wearing masks. They're not getting angry with the fools who lied to them and got them to put masks on and ruin their lives in the first place. So go to Ron Paul Institute website. Read a couple of these pieces we mentioned today. They're really worth reading. And thanks for watching us.
Very good. There are a lot of problems, and we're dealing with a problem now. It's medical and social and political and all this going on with the coronavirus. And we have a bunch of bureaucrats involved, and the power mongers are there. And it's so difficult. And yet, I come from a viewpoint which everybody knows. It's a libertarian viewpoint, where you don't use government to use force to decide who's right and who's wrong, because man is imperfect. So why allow a few people that weasel their way in, allow the worst go to the top because they have their way of getting power, and let them speak for everybody? That is why the solution to all of this, so much imperfectly, but so much better than what we're putting up with this, is the principle of voluntarism. If two individuals are trying to get along together, it can be solved by, doing it in a voluntary way. That's what the whole market is all about. Voluntarily exchange of goods and services. And no government's telling you, other than the lying and cheating and stealing, of course. But everything is voluntary. And that sorts things out. And you can do this socially, economically. You can actually do that internationally, too. You work out with voluntary agreements. But once people decide they know what's right, and they are obligated, and they have been sent here by God to change the world by force, that makes it for a bad world. And this is what we're dealing with right there. We have a problem. It's a serious problem, but it's 10 times worse than it should be, and it has to be. It doesn't have to be this way. But the principle of voluntarism, you mean two people just agreeing to get along? Yes, that's the way a lot of social things are solved. We knew it early on, about religion. People are supposed to have a voluntary decision making, and the church and the state should be separate. But where are we now? We have a position now where you can have a few scaremongers come in and close down the churches. And there's so little resistance to it. But I think there should be voluntarism between doctors and patients and governments and all. But this won't happen. Voluntarism doesn't work when the state is big. And when the state is big, they become authoritarian. And a state cannot get big without the control of the printing presses, because then they control economics and everything else. Just think how much money is being involved in bringing us to this point where we are now, and how much have we spent trying to solve the problems of too much money. And they've printed $6, $7, $8 trillion, and they're passing out, and they think they're going to solve this problem. No, it should be voluntarism, and it's a great tool, and that is what society has built on, and yet we have forgotten about that. We were pretty good at one time in this country understanding what it was like to have voluntary exchanges and the rejection of violence. But it doesn't mean it is dead and gone. It's the most practical, beneficial philosophy of life without getting involved in saying, I know what's best, I know what you should do socially, religiously, economically, and everything else. No one person knows that, but it's just the one rule. You can't hurt people and you can't steal from people. Believe me, it would solve this problem and we wouldn't be throwing trillions of dollars down the sink at the same time we're losing our liberties just as rapidly. So it's time for us to not only submit, but to stop submitting, but to resist. And that's what we need to do. So when we see people starting to resist, when we quoted the individuals now are about, 40-some% are objecting, maybe this idea of the vaccine isn't such a good idea. And the far left, these people who want to coerce us into this, they're getting worried. How could this terrible thing happen? People are starting to resist us telling them, take this vaccine. Vaccine, very well. I've had some vaccines. I thought it was wise to take a polio shot. But it's voluntary. This whole thing of coercion and coercing people to take this massive inoculations to the millions and millions. I hope people just say, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but boy, believe me, I think you should study it carefully and let it go for a while to find out what the results are. And as I told many people in 1976, more people died from the vaccine than they did from the flu, and it was a disaster because it was totally unnecessary. The vaccine wasn't good, and they're rushing this thing through for all kinds of reasons. So I would say we should take our time, step back, and look at this in a more sensible way. And that is what our goal here is: try to reveal to the people exactly how urgent it is to follow these rules, these insane rules of quarantines and everything else. And if you like it, just do it. You have every right in the world to wear masks and things. So this is a bad situation, but we're at a crossroads here where we can make a difference and decide which way are we going to do. Are we going to just say, they're already telling us the vaccine's not going to work, but we need them another one. And Gates says, well, one shot's not enough. You might need 3. Well, we gotta wake up and say, enough is enough. Let us decide these things. Don't let the politicians make these decisions, and the world would be a much better place. I think liberty wins out over authoritarianism all the time. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.